I've always tried to make a living out of dance, and so far I haven't quite succeeded, no. However, I haven't given up the hope that it is possible. So I guess to simplify the answer is that I believe it is possible, but very, very difficult indeed. And so far, yeah, that is why we are here at RID, because I teach dance, I teach choreography, which in a kind of a way, of course, is also make a living out of dance, but maybe not quite in the sense that I understand your question. To work purely within the professional field of dance, not in the educational sector, that is actually where I'm aiming at, and I haven't succeeded so far.
What would be the necessary conditions for success?
I think it has to do with the fact that the dance activity is always in a very rich context. If you're a dancer, if you classify yourself as a dancer, then you need to get in contact with some choreographer, dance company. You have to insert yourself in that context, which is, of course, as a dancer, is a big competition doing so. That's not quite how I classify myself. Do I see myself as a dancer? My main aim is to work within the dance field as a choreographer. And as a choreographer, you also have to somehow plug into a system of theaters, of funding bodies, of audience. I think these are probably the three main figures here. You have to have people that recognizes your work. They recognize your work because it is performed in theaters, but theaters, they want work that is already recognized. Of course, I forgot to mention we have critics. Then also, if a critic hasn't talked about you, it's almost like you don't exist. And it is this whole process of becoming recognized in all these different spheres, in the people that run the theaters, the critics that write reviews, so that they will have an interest to come to your performances, the audiences, who depends on the fact that critics write about you and that you are present in the theaters. It's a very complicated game where no one wants to be the first starting point, but it all has to happen all together, and I think this is the main problem here. Critical reviews, audiences, presence in the theater, all these things have to coincide. And I think that's a big challenge. And that's the way I see it, is that to reach there is a gradual process where we try to kind of incrementally build up across that board. I think you have to be extremely lucky to just be there all at once, and I haven't been so lucky yet. You have to, if you want to dance, you have to really stick to it, and it takes a huge determination. This is why I think that just to see dance as a profession, it's not enough, because it won't become your profession unless it is already a very, very important part of your life and your vision of what you do in this world, essentially. That yes, you have commercial artists that do it just because they know the audience will like it, and you have, shall I say more perhaps, pure artists that work with their vision, their ideals, and they don't care about the audiences. I don't think it is quite that simple. I mean, for me, for instance, though when I see a work that audiences love, and I can see factors that makes them like that, I feel kind of, even though in a sense I would like to make a work that audiences would love, it's not that simple. It's not just that you make a work that suddenly makes a breakthrough. It has to do with the whole this network of elements that I said before. You can make the most fantastic commercial work, but if you're an unknown choreographer in terms of critical reviews and presence in the theaters, what theater wants to put it up anyway? It doesn't just have to do with your idea, it has to do with how your idea coincides with all these other things. And then you can make a very quirky work that is very strange and odd, and you would think this is not at all, the audiences won't get it in a big scale. But then again, if you look in the fine arts world, you have artists that have become absolutely artistic superstars, by putting up dead sharks in museums and things that you wouldn't normally think that audiences perhaps would appreciate. But it becomes, in the arts world, becomes a big thing, audiences want, and it's not that simple of having it commercial or aesthetically experimental. It's a very much more complex set of relationships, I think. I use a lot of the techniques of generating movements that he does. And then you can of course ask, well, does that make me copy Forsyth's work? Well, I think it's not quite that simple, because Forsyth's techniques, they're hugely dependent on who actually performs them. It's a set of principles that you can apply, but each person that applies it does so in a different way, and you put it in different contexts. If I may take an example, last autumn I was invited to go to South Korea and take part in an international dance festival there. And so I started to prepare a duet, which was essentially based on 4 Scythian improvisations. We set up a scheme of themes, improvisational themes, that we essentially moved through the choreography. And these themes were based on different operations that is not precisely the operations that Forsyth discusses, but it is more my personal modifications, but they are strongly related. However, once I came over to Korea, we were invited very late to this festival, so the work wasn't, the structures that we worked with, they weren't finished. We still had a lot of exploration to do to really find ways to fully explore these themes that we had set up. But when I came over to Korea, I was then suddenly inserted in a different artistic context of actors, models, dancers with very different kinds of knowledge. Also, this sort of cultural impression of going to Korea was quite immense. It had a very deep impact on me. It was just so different to be there, and suddenly all this work that we've done here and prepared here in London came into a different perspective to me once I came over to Korea. And suddenly I built up this, from being this very abstract play with form, with embodied form, I kind of saw that as a relationship also between cultures, between me being in Korea and this tradition of European dance theatre, with the traditions that these Korean dancers had encountered. And so I then engaged. I went and did some workshop with some models they have a modeling department in one of the colleges there, so I took some of these models to be part of the scene. I took a couple of Korean dancers to be part of the work. And I built up this more narrative structure where, shall I say, these improvisations, they were inserted in a very theatrical context, narrative theatrical context, essentially about a Western couple coming into a kind of cafe or bar in an Eastern place, and events play out there. We had dialogue that developed, and it all became very narrative, and this abstraction part became more like an alternative reality or a dream state within that work. Yes, I am strongly rooted in certain methods and ideas and ways of relating to body and space. However, in each particular work, it is very dependent. How I use that is very, very dependent on the particular context and influences that are present for me when I work. And so that's why I think that one cannot say just that I copy Forsyth or anyone else, but it is about being part of a tradition. You use tools in a tradition, but that evolves depending on your particular and unique cultural context.